Hey, everybody, this is Travis, and I'm so excited to welcome you to episode 3 of the Spirit Cabinet podcast, and I'm really excited for today's guest. There have been some really kind of interesting synchronicities that was sort of confirmation, like, yes, this is someone who I want to talk to, this is someone I want to have a conversation with. So as you saw from the advertisements and the Facebook post earlier on, my guest today is Joanna Bartlett, medium and author, and without any hesitation, let's just get right into the conversation. So thank you, Joanna, for joining me.
Oh, it's lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I have to kind of tell you how I came across you. Excuse me. I'm a big, I like to scavenge Amazon. Like a lot of us, I'm a big book person, and I'm always looking for anything related to spiritualism or mediumship, and I came across Led by Light. And anytime that I see someone who I might not be familiar with, I go and I check and see if they have a website and all that sort of stuff. And so I went to your website, and first thing was I saw purple hair, and I'm like, okay, this is a person I could hang out with. This is a person I could have a good time with. And the feathers, which I have a thing for feathers, so I'm like, okay, I can vibe with this person. And that kind of led me to your YouTube and your vlogs, and in the room, which the listeners can't see, I can see right now on Skype, I'm like, there's the purple, and I saw the spirit trumpet in the background. I'm like, okay, gotta have a conversation with this person. Should be perfect for my intention here. So, the first thing, I guess, that I really want to kind of get into, and one of the things that I really enjoyed when I was sort of looking you up and learning more about you is, yes, you're a practicing medium, but you're also a spiritualist. How did you come into spiritualism?
So I found out about spiritualism when I moved to Rochester, New York in 2000, and the person I moved there with, we were dating at the time, and then, promptly broke up, as those things go, but he's a great friend now. We went to a psychic fair, and he got a reading from a Marty Hughes, who's a medium in Lilydale, and she said, you guys need to go to Plymouth Spiritualist Church. It was a Saturday, I think, so she said, you need to go there tomorrow. That's just what you need to do. So we obeyed and promptly went to Plymouth Spiritualist Church in Rochester, and I guess I just found it. I'd never been a church-going person before, so I had to do some kind of reconciliation with myself around, like, I don't know, being somebody who goes to church all the time. But I liked it. It felt like home to me. The spiritualist, of course I can't think of the word for it right now, but the spiritualist principles, that's it. They worked for me. There wasn't a whole lot of dogma, but it was about things that I already believed. And so that's essentially how I started going, and then it just kind of went from there. I signed up for, mediumship classes and healing classes and dream interpretation and spirit guides and all that sort of thing. And it made things make sense to me. It made experiences that I'd had earlier in my life make sense finally. So it felt good. It felt like home.
Now, obviously, just from your voice, just from your accent, you're English.
Yeah.
And being that spiritualism seems to be more prevalent in the UK, were you a little bit familiar with spiritualism before Rochester, or was it just like a brand new realm for you?
It was brand new. I left England when I was 10, and I lived in Barbados for 4 years and moved to the US when I was 14. And I went to an Anglican private school in England, but my parents weren't religious at all, and so we didn't go to church or anything. So it wasn't something that anybody talked about. So it was brand new, really. And
now you're ordained through, correct me if I'm wrong, the National Spiritualist Association of Churches?
Yeah.
And is their program, is that the Morris Pratt program?
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that, or maybe what that entailed for you?
So the Morris Pratt Institute is how the National Spiritualist Association of Churches does all their certification for ordained ministers, certified mediums, commissioned healers, and national spiritualist teachers. And essentially, at least at the time I took it, I think it's the same now. It's essentially a correspondence course with 30 lessons on modern spiritualism, and you sign up for it. I can't remember how much it costs. It was very reasonable, and they send you a lesson like once, whenever you finish a lesson, you send it back, and then they'll send you the next one. And so it's a home study course in the sense that you do it on your own time. You read the materials, you read the books, you answer the questions, you write an essay, you send it back in, it gets graded. And then there's, depending on what certification you are getting, there are different testing requirements, which I don't remember off the top of my head. I know that, like, for instance, for ordination, I finished the entire 30 lessons of the course and did an essay, and then had to take a written examination at Lilydale, and then I had to have an oral examination in front of the National Spiritualist Association of Churches board members, national board members as well.
Well, that probably was a little nerve-wracking, huh?
It was, I had just given birth to my second child a week before, and so, after that experience, I mean, what's driving 2 hours to Lilydale? And I passed my newborn baby around, and I think that might have helped a little bit. It probably didn't hurt.
Right. So, one of the questions that obviously this is only the third episode, and it's a question that I intend to ask everyone, but so far, I love asking this question because I get different, just interesting takes on it from people who all kind of do similar or the same things. In your experience, in your opinion, are mediums born or are mediums made?
I've heard you ask other people this question. A bit of both, I think. I always explain it like any other ability, like, musical ability or artistic ability. I mean, there are people, so I like music. I used to gig and play music, and so that resonates with me. So there are people, there are little kids, like 4-year-olds that you hear that have amazing voices and haven't had any training. That's just their, like, natural ability that comes out. And then there are, people who are tone deaf, and then there are people kind of everywhere in between. And so I think the same with mediumship. There are people who are very naturally inclined to mediumship, and there are people who perhaps, aren't so much, and everybody can benefit from training and practice.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things that I really enjoyed when I was looking at your YouTube channel is you're speaking on natural law, because, a lot of, there are different kinds of working mediums, and some may be spiritualists and some may not be. Some come from a little bit more of a new age take on things, and so I think natural law, like law of attraction, is very popular because of things such as The Secret, but natural law, as it was taught in a general context, has many different components, and natural law is very much present within the realm of mediumship and how mediumship works. Could you maybe talk a little bit on, I think that you mentioned on a couple of your videos that there are really 3 of those natural laws, or 3 of those principles that pertain to mediumship, what those are and how they relate to the process of communication.
I can attempt to be coherent on natural law. Natural law it's very simple, I find, and also very complex at the same time. And so the ones that, I found, so when I wrote Led by Light, book 1, I realized, I need to explain how mediumship works. I need to actually put this into words. And so I did, research, and I read back through my Morris Pratt Institute materials and other books on mediumship, and somebody's book, I don't think of who it's by now, on natural law, and then, did my own kind of meditation and connecting in with my higher self to kind of go, okay, how do I explain this? And the three that came to the forefront for me were the laws of, hopefully I get this right, attraction. I'm drawing a blank now. What are the natural laws that I tell people about, Travis? You have to look them up. So it's attraction, vibration, and continuity. That's the other one. And so, the law of attraction is essentially that like attracts like. And so if you are putting good energy out there into the universe, if you were saying, I only want the highest and best good, that's what you're going to get, because that's the vibration that you're putting out there, and that's what's going to resonate with you and what's going to come in terms of your mediumship work. I mean, that it's true in all of life, all of your experience in life. But in terms of your mediumship, that's how it's going to work. And the law of vibration, which I find really interesting, especially in terms of mediumship and how does it work? I mean, how are you possibly able to connect in with somebody who's no longer in physical form? And that happens because everything is in the universe is in a state of vibration, and we continue to be in a state of vibration even when we're not in physical form anymore. And every person has a unique kind of energy signature, a unique frequency at which they vibrate. I've heard mediumship be described essentially as this kind of ability to tune in to a specific frequency, much like you would tune in to a radio station. I call it like the spirit band, the spirit FM, right? You're tuning in to that person's specific frequency in spirit. And so the law of vibration allows that to happen. And it's related, to the law of attraction. All of these laws are connected together. And, in terms of the law of attraction, the more that you work on your own development in terms of your personal development as a human being, which I think is really important in terms of mediumship, is personal development and growth and spiritual growth. The more you're willing to learn about mediumship and how it works, whether that's through reading books or practice or pondering it or your own meditation, the higher your vibration is going to be and the better information you're going to get and attract in terms of connecting with spirit. And then the law of continuity essentially says that there is no break between the physical and the spiritual. It's all one part of one continuous, infinite loop. It's like the infinity symbol. There's no beginning and there's no end. And so, this natural law, all of natural law applies both in the physical and in spiritual work, which I think is actually a really wonderful thing, because I found that, as you connecting with spirit and you receive, that information, that it ends up helping you in your physical life. The more that you work on, say, your boundaries in the physical world and being able to set boundaries with people, the easier mediumship becomes, because you're much more able to and more easily able to set boundaries with people in spirit, especially as you're beginning to unfold your mediumship, which is when people tend to get kind of overwhelmed with the amount of energy that they kind of get bombarded with. But if you have good boundaries in the physical world, it makes it a lot easier to work with your gatekeeper in spirit and say, no, thank you, I'm not doing this right now. And so that's what the law of continuity does, essentially. So hopefully that all makes sense.
Yeah, beautifully. And I agree with you so much. I'm so glad that you brought up, that the spirituality of it, the personal development of it, is just as important as the mechanical aspect of it, because, and I'm sure you've seen this too with whether it be through churches or metaphysical centers or whatever, there are some people who, they may be very talented, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're spiritual, and it doesn't necessarily make them nice, and so it's a shame, because you said it perfectly, as you develop that aspect of yourself, it can lend itself so beautifully to your own personal growth and your experiences just in this human physical experience, that you should always be able to take you know, something away just from being the messenger, not even being the sitter, and learn and grow from that. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. A moment ago, you'd mentioned the term gatekeeper, which, you know, spirit guides, I think most people get the general gist of, but I think people are less familiar with the term of gatekeeper. For those who might not have heard that term, can you define kind of what that is in your experience, or how it relates to the process of mediumship?
So for me, my gatekeeper is one of my spirit guides, essentially, that it performs the role of gatekeeper. I call him my bouncer guide. He's he's the guy, he's not actually a big burly guy in my imagination, but, he's the nightclub bouncer, the guy that only lets certain people in through the velvet rope.
Okay.
So that's how I think of him. But, it's that function of only letting through what's for your highest good, for keeping, people who are in spirit in line, especially if you're doing, it's true for whether you're doing kind of a private one-on-one reading, or whether you're doing an event with, lots of people in the audience. Especially when you have a lot of people and a lot of people in spirit, you need a way to keep them, orderly. Otherwise, they're all going to be talking at once. And, if you've ever been in a room where everybody's talking at once, you can't understand what anybody is saying. You need to be able to focus in on one person at a time. And for me, my gatekeeper, does that. He lines them up and says, okay, you go. And if they're not loud enough, he says, okay, talk louder. If they're too loud, he says, back off. If I'm getting physical sensations that are overwhelming, I know my gatekeeper's the one that's going to say, hey, cut that out, please. I mean, it's all done with so much love and compassion, not quite the way that I put it, perhaps. But essentially, it's that role. And also is the role that, if I'm not, when I'm not doing mediumship work, then my gatekeeper ensures that I am not being bothered. Essentially, I get to be in control of the experience.
I want to get your opinion. I don't know that I've heard you speak on this before or comment on this before. I'm curious your take on earthbound spirits. Do you feel that that's a thing that happens, or is it more of a Hollywood influence, or is it just that's not even what I'm focused on?
So I don't focus on earthbound spirits, really. I have encountered them, and I've done work to help them transition properly. My experience with them and my understanding of them is essentially people who get a bit lost and confused on their way into transitioning fully into spirit after their physical body dies. That can happen because they had a very difficult or traumatic death, or a sudden death that they didn't really realize what was happening. It can happen with parents who are sticking around because they want to make sure their kids are okay, or with kids who have a lot of shame, if people have a lot of shame or fear, or sometimes if people were kind of heavily under the influence of some substance or the other, the mind-altering substance, whether it's drugs or alcohol or whatever, at the time of their passing. It seems like people sometimes just get kind of stuck. I haven't found them to be malicious, generally. My belief is that we're all moving towards healing all the time, and people who are earthbound, who haven't fully completed their transition into spirit, the reason that they bug mediums is because they want help, because essentially, especially an untrained or, kind of unfolding medium, essentially has a light on above their house, and it's like, oh, a light, someone who can hear me and talk to me. Let's go see if they can help me. And I really think that's what they're trying to do, is they're just trying to find their way into spirit and move toward their own healing.
So you have, and I know that in advertising or putting out that I was going to be talking to you, I know that we're going to talk a little bit about your latest book, but I have to give you kudos, because there's Led by Light 1 and 2, Signs from Spirit, Intuitive Symbols, the Spiritual Symbol Workbook. Your like a writeaholic, and I think it's fantastic. I mean, have you always had a love for writing, or was that a passion to put that information out there when when you came into spiritualism? What's your sort of your motivation?
So I've always been a professional writer. I started out at a small weekly newspaper in North Carolina as a journalist, and in my early 20s, and have been one way or the other been writing professionally, doing a variety of things: marketing, fundraising, public relations, web content development and web content marketing, and just always been writing has been kind of a focus of my job. And so that part is relatively easy, I suppose. And I've always been kind of a producer of written words in that way. And then I've always wanted to be an author, though I was thinking it would be fiction. I have two fiction books really I'm working on at the moment. But what happened was I had started a development circle with some students that I was teaching, and basically every time we meditated, I got instructions from my guides or from Spirit, and I said, well, how am I going to teach this, this development circle? And they said, okay, this is what you're going to teach this week, next week, for the first 6 weeks, you're going to do this, and then you're going to create a course out of this, and then you're going to write a book with this information. And it just seemed like every time I sat down and meditated, I got more instructions. And so I'm just doing what I'm told in some ways, if that makes sense.
Right. So which I think is fantastic, the teaching aspect is, writing being the form of teaching as well, but so, you talked about putting together these development circles and things like that. Do you find that there's, with the students that come to you or the circle members that come to you, is there maybe one challenge or one pitfall that you see people hit the most? Because I know in the short time that I've been doing these little broadcasts, I've gotten a lot of people listening who are interested in developing for themselves or who've maybe not sat in a circle. But what advice might you give to someone as a person who's taught and seen people grow and develop?
Yeah, I can't think of any one thing that everybody has an issue with. I encounter, it seems like a lot of people, they come to see me, or they come, as a student mostly because they're already getting information and they don't know what to do with it, and it's, driving them a little bit mad. It's kind of intruding into their lives, and so they want to learn how to control it. And then the other things is often kind of fear around the whole thing of essentially making sure that they only get stuff that's enjoyable, that they can be in kind of control of the experience, and not have it, turn their life topsy-turvy, essentially.
Right.
And so the thing I teach pretty much everybody I talk to is to set their intention and to ask only for their highest good. And that's one of the first things I learned in mediumship, and it's probably one of the most profound things that I've learned, is just simply to say, I will only let in, I'll only accept my highest and best good, or however you want to word it, and know that that's all that you're going to get, that your word is law in that sense.
Is there any advice that you might give to someone who, I've gotten a lot of this, where people, they say, I maybe live in the middle of nowhere, there's not a spiritualist church, or there's not a lot of New Age centers, or maybe I'm in the Bible Belt, and I want to sit for development. I don't know, should I start my own circle? Can I sit by myself? What advice might you give to someone as just a starting point, or if they really don't know where to go? I mean, of course, you can absolutely go out and buy Led by Light 1 and 2. But outside of the books, which are great, what might you suggest to someone?
Actually, one of the next books I'm working on right now is about development circles, and how to start one, how to run one, with a bunch of exercises to develop, various aspects of your abilities. Because development circles really are wonderful. And whether, when I was first complaining, I am the only spiritualist minister in Oregon. And one of the few, when I first started doing readings in Eugene a few years ago, I was the only medium. And I think most of the other mediums in town are ones that I have been my students at this point. There are more in Portland and Bend and other areas, but not in Eugene. And so there weren't any development circles here. And so I ended up started one, and then it was an open circle, and it didn't quite flow the way I wanted it to. And so I ended up starting a closed circle, which worked much better. And so, that's an option. I do know of some people who have online development circles, which I haven't personally done, but is quite intriguing. You don't necessarily all need to be in the same physical location, to be connected. I mean, you can do, I do readings for people either through phone or web chat that aren't in my physical location, and we connect, the energy connects just fine. So I imagine you could have successful mediumship development circles, that way as well. And then one of the other things I want to work on more this year is to develop some online courses, and I also, one of my students is quite heavy into doing online classes with James Van Prague and Andy Bing and can't remember who else, a couple of other people, because that's another way that you can connect with people and learn, and it can feel more like an in-person or live thing.
That's a great point. Spirit isn't dumb, and as we evolve and grow and change as a society, they absolutely come up with different ways to keep up with us, and I'm sure they probably are behind a lot of those changes to begin with. One of the podcasts, I guess you'd call it a podcast, that I enjoy listening to is Sacred Dance with Trance with Kathy Beltran, and I know they've been doing a lot of, experimentation with different ways of using the internet to come together and sit, and they've been having some fantastic results. So I think that's a great point to make for people who maybe feel a little bit isolated. Now, your latest book is called Spirit Energy: Table Tipping, Trumpet Voices, Trance Channeling, and Other Phenomena of Physical Mediumship. And I was so excited to see this. What made you want to write about physical phenomena?
So, originally I had planned Led by Light as this 3-book series, and then when I wrote book 2, it ended up being this giant book that basically my idea was it was going to include mental mediumship and physical mediumship. And I originally published it that way last year, and then early this year I said, well, that's crazy. And I split it up into 2, it was this 400-page book, so I split it up into 2 books so that Spirit Energy could kind of get its own attention, because it is physical mediumship is a specific kind of thing that, not everybody is into. And I wanted to write about it, I think, honestly, because I wanted to be thorough in my covering of mediumship. It's not all mental mediumship, clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, all of that stuff. Physical mediumship, it's interesting, it's fun. Yeah. It's kind of fun, really. I've
been wanting to, it's something that on just a personal level, a personal interest, has been a somewhat of an obsession, and I've talked about it in some of my personal lives. I've never discussed it in any of the Spirit Cabinet broadcasts, and I've been wanting the perfect opportunity to sort of ease people into it without, I guess, maybe freaking them out, because like you said, it definitely is a horse of a different color. But for those who might be listening who are unfamiliar with physical mediumship, can you kind of explain the difference between physical and mental?
Well, the very basic difference between physical mediumship and mental mediumship is that mental mediumship is a medium receiving information within their mind mostly. I mean, it does use your body in terms of like clairsentience when you actually feel things in your body, but it's a subjective form of mediumship where it goes through the medium and they will say, I have your dad here and he looks like this and this is what he's saying, and they share the information. It's not like the voice of your father or his face or something like that, whereas physical mediumship can be observed by the sitters with their own physical eyes and ears and that kind of thing. It tends to be something that you can see or hear, which to a lot of people it's like, oh well, I'll believe it when I see it, right? And you can actually see a table move around or that kind of thing, which is kind of cool, I think.
So I emailed you about asking if you'd be interested in letting me interview you and talk about your book. And, very graciously, you sent me a copy. And so I sat down and I read it, and I got a few pages in, and I got really excited because you mentioned someone who I never thought in a million years I'd see in, like, a modern book, which is Clifford Bias. And where I live, I'm kind of equidistant between Lily Dale and Camp Chesterfield in Indiana. And Clifford Bias is one of their, they just hold him in such high esteem. He's sort of a legend at Camp Chesterfield. His home is still there. I believe Reverend Juana Irving lives in the home that used to be Clifford Bias's. And in my office, I have a framed photograph on my desk of Clifford Bias, another medium by the name of Charles Swan, sitting on the porch of an old house at Camp Chesterfield with a spirit trumpet. So as soon as I saw that you talked about Clifford, I was just like, oh gosh, this is so cool. Someone knows this guy, or someone's, continuing his teachings. So that was just really kind of a neat little side thing for me. And
nice.
And I went through your book. I went through it all in one sitting, and you really do touch on a little bit of all the different aspects that we've seen with physical mediumship. One thing, like in the title itself or the subtitle, you mentioned table tipping and trumpet and trance, and a lot of physical phenomena stems from ectoplasm. But for those who might not be familiar with ectoplasm, when you say that word, they automatically think green slime because of Ghostbusters. How do you define, or how might you describe ectoplasm, or how it's produced in relation to the physical phenomena that happens?
So my understanding of ectoplasm, and I don't know if I've actually ever produced any myself. I don't know if I would be a particularly good physical medium. I don't claim to be, an expert on it. So my understanding of ectoplasm is it's produced from kind of essentially etheric substance that we each have, and physical mediums tend to have a lot of this etheric energy and exude essentially from all of their orifices when they sit for physical mediumship. And it's really just energy. It's all energy. Our physical form is just energy. And so it is kind of a form of energy that is maybe a little bit in between kind of just energy and physical substance, that those in spirit can kind of alter the composition of somewhat to make it a bit more give it a bit more kind of physical substance, make it a bit more solid, to then be able to use to create, the rods and things to move tables around, or to create a voice box for direct voice through trumpet mediumship, or, those kinds of things. Or, for transfiguration and materialization, to be an overlay over the medium space.
When you were doing a lot of your research or just your own studies and development, were there any particular physical mediums of the past who maybe stood out to you or interested you more than some others?
about like Daniel Douglas Home, and I like Clifford Bias. I got a little booklet of his it was actually when I was doing my pastoral skills training for my ordination. I forgot about that part of the process somehow. We had this 2-week intensive at Lilydale, 6 days a week for like 10 hours a day. It was really intense. And I was in the Lilydale bookstore and saw this, was it that or the NSAC bookstore? I don't remember. One of the bookstores picked up this little pamphlet from Clifford Bias on physical mediumship, and something said, I need this book. I need to take this home with me, even though it wasn't, I don't think I even read it at the time. I just knew it was supposed to come home with me. And so that came in very handy doing the research. I'm not honestly very good about names. I know the Wallaces did a bunch of research into physical mediumship as well, but I'm not the best at remembering people's names after the fact, sadly.
Understandable. Now, I know that, one thing that you clarify is that, this is information that I wanted to put out there. I don't claim to be any sort of expert, anything like that, but do you think at some point that you may seek to sit for or develop more of the physical side of things, or is it more of just a intellectual interest?
So I have sat for physical mediumship in the past. When I was in Rochester for a while, myself and a small group of mediums, we would sit for physical mediumship. We did some table tipping and that kind of thing. I was part of another circle that was specifically for physical mediumship, to develop like trumpet mediumship and trance channeling and that kind of thing. And it was interesting. But it's not my passion. I think for me, I think physical mediumship can be kind of hard on your body if it's not really the thing for you, if that makes sense. And I already don't have a whole lot of physical energy in this world, so perhaps it's not the best fit for me. But one of the reasons I wrote Spirit Energy is because, physical mediumship seems to be such a mysterious woo kind of thing. It's definitely woo-woo in the woo-woo world, even in spiritualism, that there's just not a lot of great information out there. And a lot of the books that I have that I got from Lilydale, from the NNCC bookstore, they're not widely available or they're out of print. And so I wanted to kind of, put something, I was originally going for concise, and it ended up being a bit more comprehensive than I had imagined, but that's fine. But I wanted to put something together to at least talk about each of these phases of the phenomena and how they work and why they work, and how you could perhaps get into, starting to do them or practice them more, even if it's not something that I'm not sure. I mean, who knows what I'm going to be doing in the future? I can't really predict that, so you never know, but probably not.
Now, I think that you'd mentioned you have 2 kids, or their stepchildren also. I have
2 kids that I made, and then I have 2 stepkids.
Now, do any of your little ones share your receptivity to spirit?
After my mum died a few years ago, my oldest, who's now 12, used to tell me, and this was actually before I kind of took a break from mediumship, because I was, I had 2 little kids, and I had a full-time job, and life was kind of hectic and crazy. But I remember at that time he was telling me that he would see my mom and also our cat that had passed away a few months later. Almost like he would tell me that all the time, that he would see my mom, and he doesn't remember this now, but he did. And then my youngest child, who is 10, I know that they're sensitive. They make me they sleep with the light on. They make me leave the hall light and the bathroom light on, because they've told me that when they have left their room at night to go to the bathroom, that they've seen people in the hallway. And, I let them know that that it's okay, that only the highest good is allowed in our house. And if they don't want to see it, they can just say, no, thank you. But yeah, they're very intuitive and kind of emotionally perceptive.
Okay. Now, is there a particular aspect of your work that's really like where your heart is, whether it's one-to-ones or platform or the teaching aspect, or, I mean, there's so many different ways that it can be expressed, but is there one particular thing that really just, you're in your joy or you're in your bliss?
I found, actually, to my surprise, I really enjoy teaching people. I really enjoy teaching people how to open up, their gifts and feel empowered in their lives and live authentically. I'm also very interested in intuition, which I know isn't mediumship, but is, related. And in helping people, which this is related to mediumship, helping people learn how to really trust themselves and develop that trusting relationship with themselves, which has a lot to do with that personal growth element of really, dealing with your stuff in life and moving forward and really living authentically and being yourself. And because the more that you can do that, I mean, really to embrace a path of mediumship, you've got to be willing to just say, okay, path of my highest good, bring it on, here I come. And be willing to just be yourself, mediumship requires so much trust in yourself that you are bringing through information that's clear, trust in spirit and in your guides that it's all really real. And, you're not making it all up, because I don't know if there's any medium out there that at some point doesn't go, oh my God, what if it doesn't work this time?
Right.
What if I'm just making it all up? And so I really love teaching people how to access those parts of themselves so they can really develop that trusting relationship, so they can be in, the experience and really be in the flow of it.
You had mentioned a book in one of your videos that I also really enjoyed and thought was really well written, which was Medium by Costanza Morningstar. And in one of the chapters towards the end of the book, she talks a little bit about fluctuations in your mediumship, which I don't think I'd read about or really have heard a lot of other mediums talk about too much before. Do you ever feel like you go through periods where maybe you feel more muffled, or where things seem a little bit like you have to work a little harder? And what are maybe some personal things that you do to kind of get yourself back into that flow or that connectedness?
Oh, yeah, I like that book a lot. And I did appreciate that she, talks about, she's very honest.
Yes.
About a lot of the things in mediumship, like, yes, we need this book. I would love it to have, more attention, actually. I think it's a really great book. So right now, to be honest, I'm in a kind of low energy period in terms of my mediumship. I'm not seeing clients or teaching at the moment, because I've been dealing with some health issues, which basically is just, it's my own stuff I need to deal with, so I'm getting on with that. And I certainly, when I've been seeing clients regularly, some sessions go better than others, and that's for a variety of reasons that happens. That sometimes it's your energy and your energy level, where you're at emotionally, and sometimes it's the client and where they are. People who are extremely heavily in grief can be very hard to read sometimes, because they're just not ready. Or people who go see too many mediums in a row can also, the energy's not there. The people in spirit are exhausted from trying to come through all these mediums, and so they don't have a lot to say. And so I think it's good to be open to why things might feel difficult or muffled, or what, that the connection isn't really there. I think we often actually tend to blame ourselves and say, oh, I must be doing something wrong. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it really is the person that you're reading. Not to blame them, not to say, oh, it's their fault, but it's just an energy, that people kind of bring with them, or how open they are to it or not. And then there are times when, what we need to do is really take care of ourselves. We need to take a step back sometimes. We need to look at the underlying emotional issues that we have in our lives and do some serious healing work and, walk the talk. What happened with me is I was in my development circle. During a meditation, I got a clear message from Spirit that I needed to just set things down for a while. And I went, what? Really? But what are you talking about? I'm teaching. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. And I was told, no, you just need to stop for a while. And I said, oh, well, okay then. I guess I'll do that. And so I am. And I know that's, I know this period isn't going to last forever. And it is what it is right now. And that's okay, and that it's, it's ultimately all okay. There are things that you can do, to raise your vibration or clear your vibration, like, making sure that you're grounded, making sure that you are, like, taking that time to ground yourself, making sure that you're not taking on stuff that's not yours, energy that's not yours from other people, and releasing that, deliberately, consciously releasing that. Making sure that you're not taking on emotionally, things from clients and people that you read that ultimately, it's not yours. You can't fix people. We're not supposed to be fixing anybody. Mediumship can provide a lot of healing, but you can't do that work for anybody else. We each have to do our own work. There's lots of things you can do to raise your vibration, like, spending time in nature, doing acts of kindness, becoming aware of your own thoughts and the thoughts that go through your head, all day long, and, lots of little things like that. But sometimes you need to, I don't know, at least I've learned I need to take a break every so often.
Oh, yes, and it's so hard, I think, to remind ourselves that every sitting is essentially an experiment with us and with the spirit world, and it's experimental. All mediumship is experimental, and I think you hit the nail on the head. As people who, whether they're a psychic, a medium, a spiritual healer, there's that part of us that's always looking to help, and it can be really easy to fall into forgetting to take care of ourselves at the same time. It's like when you're on the airplane and they tell you to fasten your own oxygen mask before you assist the person next to you. So yeah, there's absolutely nothing wrong with stepping back and taking a breather, because it can be a very intense thing, especially when, like you said, you are dealing with grief on a consistent basis. And it's not the lightest of no one goes to their guidance, their high school guidance counselor, and they ask you what you want to do. I think very few people are like, hey, I want to talk to dead people and deal with grief and death all the time. So I absolutely relate to you there. I wanted to get your opinion too. I've been asking people this when I do this interview. Where do you see the future of spiritualism moving? Is there mediumship is always going to be present no matter what, in some form or fashion, but spiritualism on itself isn't the hot thing that it once was. Do you see changes taking place?
I don't know, honestly. There's aspects to how spiritualism is practiced in the world, at least in the US, that I've encountered, that make me kind of sad. Somebody explained spiritualism to me once as like there's this three-legged stool of spiritualism. One is mediumship, one leg is healing, and the other leg is spiritualist philosophy and practice in your daily life. And my feeling is that spiritualism as a religion has got too hung up on mediumship phenomena.
Yeah.
And, trying to prove mediumship, to prove it's real, prove it's, not fraudulent, prove it's actually happening. And I personally don't think that that's the point of spiritualism. I think mediumship is great and lovely. And, I've seen how healing it can be for people to connect in with their loved ones and know that they continue, know that they're still there, know that the love is still there. And I think the point really is so that we can live better lives here and now. And I feel like a lot of spiritualism seems to lose sight of that. And I would love to see it focus more on the philosophy of spiritualism and how we can use that in our daily lives and take those teachings that we learn through mediumship, that we learn from spirit, and really incorporate them into our lives to live better lives, to create a better world.
Absolutely.
So I don't know if we'll go there, but that's what I would love to see.
We're hoping so. I mean, one thing that makes me really happy is, more so than ever, regardless of whether it's under the umbrella of spiritualism, but in mediumship itself, I've seen more in the past 5 or so years, more young people stepping into the work, and I'm hoping that maybe we'll start to see some of the same things in spiritualist organizations, more of a gap between the older generations and the younger generations, and which doesn't necessarily segue me into my next question, but lots of people, I think probably when you see polls and stuff, it's usually around 70% of people believe in life after death, or psychic phenomena, or things that are unexplained. But was there ever a moment for you, whether it be in your development or your own clients, or just in your past, that really kind of took you from believing into knowing?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I'm just trying to say, so I've always known, and things have happened, like, in my life, like, when I was in Rochester, and the house that I bought there, I remember shortly after I'd moved in, there's a 2-story house, and there's a door at the top of the stairs to the second floor, to the landing. And I was upstairs, and I was going downstairs, my arms were full of things, and I think I was probably thinking, it'd be nice, I wish somebody could open this door for me. The door handle turned, and the door opened. It was great. I said, oh, thank you, that was very helpful. And when I first signed up for the Maurice Pratt Institute courses, I remember being at home on my own in the evening, starting on the first lesson, and all this knocking started happening around my office, which actually freaked me out at the time because it was a little overwhelming. But then I felt that it was my grandpa, my uncle, one of my uncles, and saying, yes, you're doing it. I always felt very strongly pushed toward spiritualist ministry. And so there was that, so I've always kind of known in that way. For me, in terms of my own abilities, I think it was cemented when I was doing a reading for someone a few years ago, and there was, I can't remember what it was exactly. I think it was like I got an image of like a man. It was like a black and white photo that I saw, and I got a name, which I don't often get names. I got a name, I think his name was John or something, and a description. I was able to describe what he was wearing, and I think his occupation. And the client was like, well, okay, sure, I like you. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt, right. But I'm not really connecting. And she emailed me like a day or two later saying, after my reading with you, I talked to my mum, and she found, in a photo album, a picture of this guy and said, yes, that's your great-grandfather or grandpa John or whatever, and he was this, and there was this photo that looked like him. I was like, yes, I'm not making it up. It's really real. Because, she didn't know it. I couldn't even be, like, reading her mind, right?
Exactly.
Because she didn't even know that about this information. And so that was a really cool moment for me.
Exactly. I found, even for myself, some of the most crazy experiences are usually when you have a session, you're like, oh damn, I wasn't on my A game today, and then they come back later, and what you've given them is either someone or some things that they didn't know. Like you said, it wasn't in their mind, so it wasn't like you were telepathically drawing it from them. That's labeled or later able to be validated. It's just it's exciting. It kind of brings that excitement back to it all over again. Now, you'd mentioned Lilydale. I talk about Lilydale a lot and stuff like that in my lives, and it's just a magical place. I'm always trying to get people like, you gotta go. Do you remember your first time going?
No, not specifically. I mean, I remember going at some point, when I was in Rochester. I don't remember at what point in my training or development I was. I remember, staying there for 2 weeks during that pastoral training. That was pretty intense and memorable. I stayed there, and I try to go there every couple of years. I go back to Rochester in the summers to pick up my kids who visit their dad, who lives in Rochester. And so every couple of years or so, I try and stop into Lilydale to say hello and, say hello to the people I know and that kind of thing. But it is a special place.
Yes, it's one of those places, and I've experienced this very few times in my life, where you just automatically feel at home, and you just automatically feel comfortable. And it's so funny to me, that life kind of took you, and you ended up in Rochester, given its history with spiritualism. So it's no surprise to me at all, or there's no sort of coincidence to me that life kind of took you geographically in that way. We're coming up at the end of the hour. I don't want to keep you too much longer, but is there anything that either has been on your mind or your heart, or just any maybe final sentiment that you might want to share with people?
Ooh, I don't know. I wasn't quite prepared for that. I think if I can be coherent about it, really trusting yourself and learning to listen to yourself is such an important thing in this world. We get so much, information from outside of us, and we are bashed basically over and over the head about how we're supposed to look to outside authority for everything. Mm-hmm. For all the truths of our lives, we're supposed to look outside of ourselves for approval, for likes, for all the things, right? And what's really important is that relationship that you have with yourself, and your willingness to be honest with yourself, to be aware of what's really going on with you, and being okay with yourself, being okay being alone with yourself and with your thoughts and your own feelings and all of that. And, doing that helps you be more in the present moment. And this is related to mediumship somehow, because, mediumship, I've gotten really into mindfulness in the last year or so. And mindfulness and mediumship feel like an odd combination in many ways. And what I've realized is that they're the perfect match, because mindfulness, which brings you into the present moment, it's the only moment that mediumship can happen. The present moment right now is when that connection with loved ones in spirit is able to happen. It's that you can only connect right now. You can't be anywhere else. You can't be in yesterday. You can't be in what you're going to do later today. You can only be in the right now in order to be able to connect in with that energy and spirit. And you have to really ultimately be, for me anyway, be okay, with yourself. Be able to be in that now moment in life, because that's the richest experience that you're going to have.
Perfectly said. Beautiful. Thank you for that. So I know that you're doing a bit of a break right now, just to kind of gather yourself and refocus. But for people who maybe, whether it's classes or services for the future, how can people get a hold of you?
So my website is alightintuition.com, or you can probably just search for my name, Joanna Bartlett, and I'll come up on Google. So yeah, as you mentioned, I've got lots of books. Somehow that happened in the last couple of years. So feel free to buy my books. But if you go to my website, you can sign up for my mailing list and be the first to know about whatever it is that I'm coming up with next.
Which we will definitely be excited for and keep our eye on. I've appreciated you coming on here, and I've enjoyed just picking your brain and having a conversation with you. I just want to thank you so much, and whenever, this next leg of its journey reveals itself to you, I'd love to talk to you again. But, yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. It's been lovely. I can talk for hours about this stuff, apparently, so...
Yes, definitely.
Thanks for having me.
Well, you have a great rest of your evening.
You too.
See ya.
Bye.